Hello, good evening, oof, men, women, and children of all ages. Somebody once told me that when the camera rolled or when the lights were on, I became this other person. What's the big deal? I think that's fine. You be as many people as you want. Anyway, again, my thank yous. Oh my heavens, like over 100. You are telling people, you are sharing. You want to know why it's working? It's because it's real. Because I'm talking to each one of you separately. And you're learning about a little lady who just wants to tell her story. But in the process, I'm relating to you because you got a story, you got a book in your belly too. Even if it's not a book, you know you have a story. You all do. So hello, thank you again for tuning in or tuning out and tuning in later. But everything is great, and I'm just very grateful. So before we start the reading, and things are going to get really, I don't say any more intense, because I think in some ways they've been pretty intense. But I think you're seeing me kind of laugh at some of the aspects of my life. And not to take myself seriously, obviously. I mean, duh. There's no lights, auction, makeup, camera. You know, I'm not even dressed. I'm sitting in my dining room. But I think you're realizing that, you know, reality is really reality. It's not all makeup and wardrobe and people in your plate. I mean, it's not that. Reality is just being who you are. And that's who you're getting. You're getting Susan Lee Mintz, Committed to Love. I had a couple people who were in a writing class. Before I read tonight, I want to just take a couple minutes to tell you. A couple people called me who were in a writing class that I taught a few years ago in my church. And this book did not just happen overnight, as some of you may know, but it is a journey, as your life is. All right, I'm going to take it from the beginning because I know I've been jumping around a little bit, but I started writing when Jeff was in the hospital. And this is only going to take a few minutes, but I have to tell you the whole 30 years, coming up on 30 years of perseverance and never giving up on what I know God wants me to do. Tell my story, whether it's 10 or a million. I'm going for the million. But when he was put in the hospital on June 20th, if you know what COVID looked like with all the people dressed up with everything, the way the nurses and the doctors looked, frightening. That's what it looked like when Jeff was put in West Boca Med at the hospital. In fact, one of his nurses got in touch with me who took care of him. Another couple people who I was with hospice with. It was amazing to be connecting with people who do go back with me all these years. But it was on June 20th, 1992, when he went in West Boca Med, in Boca, and everybody was doing something on him. This poor, frail man was standing there in a private room, obviously isolated, and he was just standing there, and everybody was doing something on him, I was helpless, and here I was the one, his wife, his friend, his caregiver who should have been taking care of him. I couldn't do anything. But in a chair across from his bed, there was a chair. I just sat down. They let me stay. I sat down. Of course, they wanted me to get tested over and over again, thinking I was not going to get this. It's not where we're coming from, folks. I'm not going to get HIV or AIDS. We didn't have a sexual relationship for many years, but we did everything else. But I had a piece of paper and a pencil, and all I did was say, I'm not believing what I'm reading, what I'm seeing. Everybody is taking care of my husband but me. I should be doing something. I just started writing. I was filling up this little pad of paper. I went down to the gift shop. I picked up my first spiral bound notebook. When I went back in the room, that's all I did every day. I documented. And I'm saying it was a diary, every day, what was happening. The doctors were actually calling me to find out what his fever went to, telling me what it was, the meds working. They were using me out of these journals that I was keeping every day what was going on. I was their hands. So when he passed in 94, on August 20th, 1994, I stopped. And then it was in 1998, and I just put these journals on a shelf. In 1998, I went to my other house, my other place, and my neighbor looked at me, and she knew I was so unhappy as I was going up and taking care of my parents who were aging up in New York. She said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to write my book. I want to write my story." She looked straight at me. She said, "Do it." Hi, Muriel. She said, "Do it." I had a Gateway, beautiful Gateway computer, which I hardly knew what to do. And I only got the computer because I liked this man who lived near my folks, and he was a computer person, so I bought a computer. Never knew how to use it, but I learned. So, it was in 2098 to 2000 that I absolutely sat for the 2 years in front of this computer, and I started transposing with the different highlighters, yellow, red, blue, tears streaming down my cheeks when I was even journaling, and then streaming down my cheeks when I was typing. Then that took 2 years. That sat also in my computer until 2007. I never did anything with it. In 2007, I printed out a few copies, a few dozen, and when I went over to Office Max, I got to know the people there really well. And they spiral bound and printed up, dozens. I mean, this was tens of thousands of dollars worth of 30-year adventure. But we did that in 2007. And then in 2008, I sent it to the copyright people, because people were telling me, "Oh, you don't want to be sending out stuff before it's copyrighted. Oh, you this, oh, you that." So I sent it to get copyrighted. And I forgot about it again. I forgot. 2008, I get a letter in the mail, it's copyrighted. Then we started sending out these spiral-bound notebooks all over. My dear friend Rob Scott, who I give so much credit to, we sent out these bulk mailings of these thick 8x10 spiral-bound notebooks. But this was the book, but in a spiral-bound 8x10 form. Then a man came along who took the book, this big book, and put it into what's called the treatment. And the treatment was what's on my website, susanmintz.com. The treatment is a 13-page document that you can read on the computer, or you can print it out, but it's only 13 pages, and it will fill you in on my story, as will everything else on my website. I tell you every night, same thing. Go to susanmintz.com, look at the pretty photos, wonderful photos. You can go to the Jeffrey link. There's tells you all about Jeffrey a lot. And then you can just go and see all the interviews and you can read it. So then I did that, and then the next thing I know is after the treatment, we sent out the treatment. Hundreds. Rob sent it. We sent out every year. I realized I wasn't going to be on the New York Times bestseller list. They weren't ringing off the hook for the big time interviews, so I had to self-publish. Best thing I ever did. Got a call about somebody from Missouri, Michelle Gines from Purpose Publishing, Christian publisher. She'll do other books, but Purpose Publishing. Talk about purpose. There it was. I self-published in 2016. Sold one book. I don't know how many I sold. But anyway, that's how it started. And to this day, if you think that you can't do it, I'm going on 30 years. Okay, 1992 to 2022. This is a 30-year journey to get me to talk to you. Then not care about whether it's picked up by series or HBO or whether 1 million people watch. But again, I think that would be really good. The main thing is that I'm helping. And I must be doing something right because there are people who are. It's growing. Now remember what I also said. If you go to my story, well, it's on my story for a day, and you click on it, that little bar goes across, 10 seconds later, I'm off and somebody else is on. So just remember, in the left corner, it says, watch video. okay? Always my Facebook page is the best because it's always there. But if you want to hit watch video, you can. But thank you all for your time and caring and your support. And I know you're telling people outside of Facebook. In fact, if I can only have Facebook friends come on, would you please tell people, remind me that I have to have more friends, and then, or call or text me and say, Ms. Mintz or Susan Mintz, this person wants to be a friend so they can get on or do something. Tell them, even people you don't like, people you don't know, tell them if they want to be a friend, because that's the only way they can look on this. We're not into the watch parties yet, but please, I'd say, tell anybody, everybody, and if they want to be a friend, fine with me, as long as they want to get something out of this, and that's my big thing. Just want you to get something out of my story. So, I always back up a little bit, that, and then this is going to be good, because I'm going to take you all the way up tonight to chapter 5, No More Lies. They're all good, but the dreaded diagnosis. Remember I told you yesterday, at some point in your life, you may hear something you don't want to hear, but you're going to have to. The dreaded diagnosis, some dates you'll never forget. Let me just back up a little. Here we go. The X-ray revealed that Jeff had pneumonia. The doctor said it could be the reason it was causing his symptoms, because he could have had it for a while. He had it for a while, all right. The other thing I know you like is the personals, when I stop and in between and I tell you about certain things, or I make it more personal, or I expound on why it could pertain to you or your mother or your brother or an uncle or somebody you don't even like. I keep going back to that. I don't know why, but that is the way it is. Somebody you know may end up having this, and therefore you know that if I can get through it, so can you. If I can write this out, you can. If I can speak it out and never give up, so can you. Your story matters, and the only one it matters to is you. So if you want to write your book, write it. If you don't, diary. If you don't, don't. Just listen. But most people have a book in their belly. They just don't know where to begin. So, we got the X-ray revealed he had pneumonia. He said it could be there for a while. He gave you an antibiotic and said he'd call us in the morning with the lab reports. We were almost happy to hear it was only pneumonia. We waited anxiously for the results, but he'd gotten worse overnight and couldn't breathe. At 5:00 p.m. on June 19, 1992, the phone rang. Our doctor was downstairs, and we lived in a high-rise. I had to buzz him up. You don't on a Friday night buzz your doctor up to your house. Our doctor was downstairs, and the look on his face said it all. I held your hands as he gave us the devastating news. Your AIDS test came back positive. He thought you had PCP pneumonia, full-blown AIDS. You'd be admitted into the hospital in the morning. The other thing that's interesting is this doctor was young. He'd just come out of school in New York, and he had AIDS patients up in New York. Very good hospital, very smart guy. But this was his first AIDS patient in his practice and in Boca, and since he left school. So this was a learning experience for him, because though we had patients up in New York, you imagine, this was his first one, and I was his patient previously. He was a great doctor. He didn't expect Jeffrey to be his first AIDS patient. Not my husband. I'm starting now on, Thursday night? You were infected with a deadly virus that didn't have a cure. Remember, we're talking 1992. Got to keep this in your head, where I'm coming from. This is not now. This is 30 years ago. How could we handle this disease when we didn't know if we could cope with the diagnosis? What were our reactions that Friday in June? We felt shock, denial, disbelief, anger, fear, hate, relief, acceptance, and then finally, hope. Hope. You can't live without it. You can't live without hope, and you can't live without faith. We went into shock and denied the words we'd just heard. Denial is so big. We became angry because our life was cruel, and we wanted to blame others for our suffering. We questioned our doctor, the blood work, and the results. There must have been a mistake. We said he was wrong, that we would get a better or a second opinion. But there wasn't any mistake. After our doctor left, we collapsed in each other's arms. We held each other for hours and cried ourselves to sleep. The next morning, we were going to fight the battle to save your life. Anybody relating now? Share. On Saturday, June 20th, 1992, you entered the hospital. You were so ill you didn't know what was happening. I was a zombie filling out forms. I didn't read and signing documents I couldn't understand. You were immediately taken to isolation in ICU. I don't remember much else about that day. As your wife and best friends for 23 years, there was nothing I could do for you now. I stood by feeling helpless and hopeless as you fought for life. And that, my love, is when I started to write in my journals. Here we go. I took a piece of paper, it was a pen, and documented what I was seeing and feeling. I couldn't write fast enough. Tears streaming down my cheeks as I scribbled words I could barely read. I was numb, my nerves raw, my heart ached for you. I loved you more at that moment than ever. I had to capture my thoughts on paper or I'd go insane. Remember I said writing is therapy? I ran downstairs to the gift shop and bought a spiral-bound notebook. It would be the first of 15 journals I would write. My writing kept me focused and became my chosen career after you died. It is. I've written for every form of media, print, monthlies, newspapers. Always that was going to be the big one. They're all big. This is the big one right now. I wrote, quote, I questioned the doctors, the nurses, and the lab technicians. I doubted everything and didn't trust anyone. Who were all these strangers taking care of you? And why are they doing this to you? Everyone had something to do or some task to perform. Everyone but me. You were their patient, but I was your wife. I should be the one taking care of you. I'm the one who took charge of everything and stayed in control. I want to tell them to leave you alone because I won't allow you to die. I won't let you die. My frustrations are overwhelming. I can't turn my mind off. I feel useless, like I'm on the outside looking in. As I wrote down my thoughts those first few hours, I realized I'd never faced any medical emergency or crisis before. My parents didn't sit me down and say, read this book. It will tell you everything you need to know about catastrophic illness. Never. Where was the printed outline to follow that would guide me through my anguish? There wasn't anyone or anything that could have prepared me for the diagnosis of a life-threatening illness. There's no book to tell you. No book prepares you for what's going to happen to you. And this disease had a stigma around it. Now that still exists today, which is what I'll talk about in another world. And this disease, HIV/AIDS, had a stigma around it that other illnesses didn't have. People were afraid to come in contact with those infected with HIV. Even in 1992, little was known about this deadly virus, and the mention of the word caused many to turn away. Therefore, how was I to feel? And what was I to do? Who would be there for me? Where would I go for help? I knew I felt alone, isolated, and scared. The fear of the unknown consumed me. Though people were all around me, there wasn't anyone who could hear my cries for help. I wrote, quote, "My worst fears have come true. I prayed you wouldn't become HIV positive and develop AIDS, but you did. Do you know how fearful I was every time you didn't feel well? Since 1981, when we heard about it, I've lived in my own cocoon, a dark cloud hanging over my head. I faced my fears about your lifestyle and this dreaded disease alone. I rationalized every symptom. Who could I tell? I'd done everything in my power to protect myself and to keep you safe and well. As I write my feelings down, I'll call the next phase of my life my fear factor, because it's the only thing I'm feeling now." And that was what I think chapter 2 was, the fear factor. I watched and wrote for 24 hours as a constant stream of doctors, nurses, and clinicians went in and out of your room. All hours of the day and night, people were taking your vital signs, drawing blood, and hooking you up to monitors and machines. You were on oxygen, receiving fluids, and given several antibiotics to combat this deadly infection. Barely alive, you were unaware of the seriousness of your condition. He wasn't. If the doctors couldn't stabilize you, you would die. All you could do was fight to stay alive. Dazed and numb, I wanted to crawl up inside myself and hide. But there was one more thing I had to do, and it couldn't wait any longer. I had to tell your parents. See, Jeff, that's why I stopped there, so I want to go into a little background. Chapter 5 is No More Lies. Jeffrey was adopted, and the Mintzes were a little older when they adopted him, and he was an only adopted child. To say he was spoiled, oh, yeah. To say he was loved unconditionally, Jeffrey couldn't do any wrong. He was the perfect son. He became the perfect young man, the perfect master's degree, the perfect doctor. He was wonderful, and he was a wonderful guy. I always said he was every mother's son. He really was, and he loved his parents. He was great to them. It was a wonderful relationship. I don't really think they were that thrilled with me due to my past history, but I remember when we got married, and about a week later, after the miscarriage, and a couple weeks later, and his mother, we went over to his folks' house. His parents lived right near mine. So we went over to his parents' house, and my mother-in-law was making dinner. And I remember saying to her, "I'm his wife, but you're his mother." Maybe that's some advice for some of you ladies out there. Really don't try to take a son from the mother if they have a great close relationship, or maybe a daughter to a father. But don't. I said, I'll love him, I'll take care of him, I'll be good to him, but you're his mother, and I respect that. We had a great relationship. I had a great relationship with his parents, and he had a great relationship with mine. All of us would go out together, and we would just do so many things together, and that's so important. I think when there's so much discourse now that's hateful, and I mean, you can't talk about politics, or you can't talk about religion, or you can't talk about so many things in the family. I mean, look what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, where family members are not talking to each other. Look what COVID did. I still feel that this story now, in many ways, is more relatable. Sometimes when I close my eyes, it's just, I got to get those thoughts right in here. But I think with COVID, this story became even more relatable because you turned on the TV for 2 years, and you still are, and you see these people, the nurses, the doctors, all in their gear. And you still see 500 to this day, over 2 years later, you see 500 people a day dying. These people have names. They're not a statistic. Jeffrey was not a statistic. Anybody who died from an illness, you're not a statistic. You're a human being, and you deserve to be treated like one. But what's going on today is really terrible because it is hard to communicate. I'm just glad maybe I lived in a time when it wasn't so difficult, but also the stigma I'll go into later on. The stigma today about HIV is still real. And that's what I've spoken about to groups now, and I shall try in the future to still bring awareness to that. I just want to do just another few minutes, about 5 minutes more. I don't want to keep any of you too long for fear you'll go to sleep. But, oh, my dear friend called me. One of them had said, you know what's great? He said, I used to read magazines on the toilet. He used to read magazines when he'd go on the toilet because it would take him a while. And now he watches and listens to me for half an hour. I think that's that's a great testimony. You know what? I like those kind of testimonies. So instead of reading a magazine, he tunes me in for half an hour. And you can redo me as many times as you want. You can take it, you can share it with your family. You can start having watch parties. Don't, unless you want to. I'm thrilled. Let me do just a little more. I'm going into 5. No more lies. How many times y'all lie about everything? You lie about this, you lie about that. Some point you can't. Everything's going to catch up with you. June 21st, 1992 is the day after I put him in the hospital. Dear Jeff, and I have to read just this one paragraph. Because then I'm going to reread it when I'm going to reread it when I start again. So I'm just going to read this one paragraph. I'll start here again. I have to write my notes. Dear Jeff, June 21st, this is 2 days after he's diagnosed and 1 day in the hospital. I was standing outside your hospital room waiting for your parents to arrive. I was exhausted and thought I was going to faint. The wall was the only thing holding me up. One of your nurses came over and said, that's one of the nurses that got in touch with me. I can still see her. She said, you need a hug. Then you need to eat and get away from this room. You can't do anything for your husband now, and he's going to need you later. You've got to take care of yourself. You've been carrying around this heavy burden for a long time. I'm terribly sorry about what you're going through. I understand your pain. My brother died from AIDS 2 years ago. Everyone involved suffers with this disease. As I said, she got in touch with me. Hi, Lucy, my dear friend. She got in touch with me, and so did a couple other people who I went through the hospice program, and I'd help take care of their mothers or fathers. Some in their homes, some at the care center. So, 6 degrees of separation? Everyone involved suffers with this disease. I started crying again. She brought over a box of tissues and shoved them under my arm. Her caring gesture made me smile. I said, when I called Jeff's parents, all I told them was that he had taken ill and was in the hospital. I asked them to please come immediately. We needed them. How could I tell them any more over the phone? She said something to me I'll never forget. She said, Susan, quote. You might lose a husband, but they are going to lose a child, end quote. She understood how difficult this would be for everyone. I'm going to end on that. You think about that. What COVID has done, what AIDS has done, what cancer has done. Everyone involved with a long-term or short-term illness suffers. But the one thing I will say is you have to self-care. Because if you are going to become a caregiver, you can't help anybody if you can't help yourself. But how do you say no more lies? I had to tell his parents, they lived in Hollywood, we lived in Boca. How do I tell them what's happening and what's going on? At some point, you might have to make a decision like that. And I pray you understand that if I could go through it, again, I'm talking so personally to everybody, and I know that's what's working. Maybe there'll be some repetition. Maybe there'll be some saying, oh, here she goes again, telling about this and talking about. Yes, because I'm going through something, even now, that you might be going through. And this is how you do it. Get it out. This has been wonderful for me. You have no idea how I'm looking forward to the 5:30s. I've gotten into that time slot. 5:30 to 6 o'clock. It works for me, and I know it's helping you. Please continue to go to facebook.com. You can see it. You can go back through all the episodes if you got nothing else to do for about 4 hours. But I thank all of you so much for your time. And as I always say, shalom, hello, shalom, goodbye, and shalom, peace. May you have a shalom night. Call someone and give them a hello. Give someone a hug. Don't just text anymore. Reach out. In a cold, cruel world, many times, your voice might be the only thing that keeps them from doing something really serious. Get a little warmer and get a little closer. Shalom, God bless all of you. And I have to hit finish. That's the most exciting thing. When I hit finish, I freaked out last night because I didn't see it go to my Facebook page. Oh, I freaked out and said, I can't do this over again. Bye.